Hey, this is Issara with UX in Motion, and welcome to another exciting tutorial. This time we're going to be focusing on Google Animation. What does that mean? We're going to call that, it's in the Google design specs under Animation, Responsive Interaction. I always think of responsible when I see that. I don't know why. We're going to be focusing on radial reaction here. This is what we're going to be creating, and it's two animations. One is this hamburger icon transforming into a back arrow, and the other is this cascade fade off effect where this content fades from left to right off the screen. So I hope you're ready. It's going to be a pretty awesome one. We're going to be doing a lot of different tools and techniques to make this happen. Now, before we get started, I just want to say if you've never used After Effects to animate your projects, head over to uxinmotion.net where I've created a free video fast start training for you. Just click this thing, put in your email, and we'll send you this fast start video, which is like 45 minutes. Just sit down and watch it. If you wanted to know how to animate your UI projects, just watch this. I created it just for you. It's badass. People like it. There's comments. You get to download files. It's rad. This is like what I wish I had when I was starting. It's just super easy to understand. If you think it's hard, it's not. Just watch it. Trust me. You'll thank me later. All right, this is what we're doing. Let's go check out the design source file, the PSD, because as you know, I'm an advocate of really setting yourself up for success when you get into After Effects. So it really takes the guesswork and kind of, being in the weeds out of the equation, and you're just jamming and kicking ass. So notice up top I have this arrow ref layer that's hidden. What that is it essentially represents my second lockup. Now, what does that mean? Now, when I think about these projects and when I'm hired to create these projects or I'm making them on my own, I'll typically think in terms of lockups, and it's a sort of a camera like cinematography term. But what it means is that this is our starting lockup here. This is how the composition is, and this is our ending lockup. This is, you could say, lockup number 2. So we need to create a guide or a little reference tool for us in After Effects so we know where to position and transform these layers when we're animating this hamburger turning into a back arrow. So that's what this is. This is a little guide thing that we can use in After Effects to say, hey, look, this is where things will end up. Now, I also have this little tap layer here. I have the hamburger icons are on their, or pieces are on their separate layers. Also, check this out. I've labeled these squares here. You can call them content, but they're squares, whatever. So square 1, because we're animating from left to right, I can also see, if I just review the animation again real quick, I can see that this cascade effect is created by offsetting these keyframes here. And what's happening is this one's fading first, these two are the same, these two are the same, and then this one. So what I could have done is I could have flattened, these into essentially 3 layers. This would be 1 layer, these would be another layer, and then this would be 4 layers, whatever. But what I've done is I've named them square 1, square 2A, square 2B, square 3A, 3B, and square 4. This tells me that when I'm in After Effects, I don't need to guess and say, well, which one is it? I just know that square 3A and B fade at the exact same rate. And I can actually link those with an expression to just keep it super awesome. And then we have the background here, and I just put this on 1 layer folder here. This will come into After Effects as a pre-comp, and I'll just lock it down because I'm not going to be messing with it. But if I was, I could. So there you go. So let's jam on this. So I'm going to just pop open After Effects, and we will get started here. And I'm going to go ahead and import my PSD and show you how this is done. So you can go under File, Import. If you're lame, just kidding. I didn't mean to offend anybody. I hope you weren't offended by that. Seriously. Command I is a cool way to do it. I just insult people again? That's awesome. I got to take it down a notch. Seriously. Open that up. Composition retain layer sizes is what you want. There are no layer styles here. So we're good with either one. Double click and we're in the game. You'll notice we're zoomed in at like 400%. If you hit Shift ? It'll snap your canvas to be the fit view, which is just whatever room, whatever real estate you have here. So I'm just going to go ahead and lock down my BG layer, and I'm going to get started. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is just hide this tap layer because I don't need it right now. And Let's check something out real quick. So notice that this group is actually rotating as a group, even though they're separate pieces, right? Now I could keyframe all the rotation properties here or parent them to this middle layer, but this middle layer will actually be changing shape. These layers actually change shape. It's very subtle and not easily apparent, but trust me on this one. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to parent these to a null, and if you're not sure what a null is, you're about to find out. So you can control click down in your layers panel and go new, null object. You can also go up to layer, new, null object. I love to use the very hot, red hot keyboard shortcut, Command Option Shift Y. Try that on and create a null like that, which is cool. Now you'll notice that the After Effects puts the new layer, the new null, in the center of the canvas, which is not what we want. So a null is a blank layer in After Effects. There's no pixel data at all. What we want is this anchor point. That's what's cool about it, because we can parent things to it and then rotate or scale or whatever we want to do around this anchor point, but it's in the wrong place. So if I parented now, the whole group would just kind of rotate like that. It's totally not cool. You don't believe me? You don't believe me. I can tell. So if I parent this here and I just click and drag, you can see they kind of just rotate around there. Not cool unless it's exactly what you want, and then you're stoked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the position property of this hamburger middle, because the anchor point of this guy is really like dead set in the middle of this little composition right here. So the way I can do that is if I just hit P with this layer selected for position, I can copy it. If I click position, I can go to my null, hit P there, click that, paste that in, Command V, and all of a sudden my null is exactly where I want it to be. How about that? That's pretty cool. So now we're going to go ahead and parent these guys, and we're going to create the little rotation here. So I'm just going to click and drag, or shift click my hamburgers, and I'm a vegetarian. I don't even eat hamburgers. That's crazy. And I'm going to parent, just grab the little pick whip over to null 1, and now if I hit R with the null, I can see that they're rotating exactly how I want it to, which is sweet. So I'm going to go ahead and just block out that animation. Now if you want to use the numbers I'm using here, if you hit Command K, make sure your composition, in your composition settings, your frame rate is set to 60. That's what I'm at, and that's cool because it gives you lots of frames, and I like that. And if yours happens to look like this and you're like, where's my frames, Holmes? You can just Command click to toggle between timecode and frames, which is great. And I like to start on frame 34 because that's a Fibonacci number, which is crazy, I know, but that's what we're going to do. If I hit Option R, I can drop my first keyframe on my null, my rotation keyframe at 0. I'm going to jump over 34 frames again, which put you at frame 68, and I'm just going to change this to 180. Bam. Now you'll see like nothing happened, right? But check this out. If we click and drag, check it out. We've mathematically perfectly calculated exactly what we need to do. Now I'm going to go ahead and manipulate the anchor points of my layers. You're like, why would you want to do that? Well, check this out. I'm actually planning a couple steps ahead, so you're like not clear on what's going to happen, but let me show you real quick what's going to happen. So basically, I want this layer to shrink in size, and you'll see that, it's very subtle here, but these arms here of the arrow are actually shorter than when they started, so they're actually changed in size. It's very subtle, but it's cool. So we want to do that, and there's a few ways to do that, but the way that I like the best is by using the scale property. But you have to do a couple things to make it work. So I'm going to set this up. I'm kind of planning a couple moves ahead. I'm working strategically, which is kind of how I like to work. So if I'm messing with the scale here, it's just going to do that, which is totally not what I want. But what you can do is you can unlink these layers, the height and the width here of your property. And now if I scale it, it's just going to scale that guy, which in and of itself is pretty damn sweet. But I know that what I want it to do is actually scale from the end and shorten it. Now, because I have to think backwards, this whole thing rotates like this, right? So I know that when it locks up here, I want this actually to be shorter on this side. So I'm going to make sure that when I do this, I'm working at the end of this animation, not at the beginning. It's a little confusing, right? Because I've called this layer hamburger bottom, and it is when it starts, but when we end, it actually becomes the top of the arrow. So that's a little weird. Apologize for that. I'm slightly dyslexic, so that actually messes with me a lot. But what we'll do, this is super easy, is you just hit Y on your keyboard, which brings up the pan behind anchor point tool, and it allows you to manipulate your anchor point. So now I can just click and drag, make sure my snapping is turned on. That's super important, so that it snaps it to the end here. And now if I were to scale it, you can see, boom, it just totally does that, which is so sweet. Now I'm going to go back to this guy and do the exact same thing. I'm just going to move my anchor point, hit scale, disable that just to check it out. And I'm like, yeah, baby, we're cruising. So now I know I jumped ahead a little bit, but I'm just kind of setting this up so that when we begin to animate, it'll be cool. Typically how you would think about this is you'd start to put down your position keyframes first, but it's difficult to change your anchor point position after you've been animating your position property. Sorry, I just used the word position twice. That was probably horribly confusing, but trust me, you want to think a little bit ahead of time and put your anchor point where you want it to be on your layer before you start animating. It's a big deal. All right, so cool. So now we got that. Now we can start to drop a whole bunch of keyframes. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to select these layers here, and I know for certain that I'm going to be messing with the scale on all those guys. So I'm going to hit Option S. I'm going to drop 3 keyframes across all these layers, and I'm going to be probably messing with the position as well. So I can hit Option P, and I'm going to be messing with the rotation, but not on this middle guy. So I'm just going to command click this guy and hit Option R. So now I've just put a few starting keyframes out on this guy, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually just copy all those frames over here to the end. You don't actually have to do that. I just like to do it. It makes me feel really good. So I'm going to select these, hit K on my keyboard to jump to the next keyframe, hit Command V, and I'm just going to copy these guys like so. So now I can just visually see real quick that I've got, like, sweet, I've got some stuff that I know is going to be happening here. Like we know for certain things are going to be going down. So I'm going to turn on my arrow ref at this point because it's time to roll up our sleeves and get to work. We got that. So I know that and we'll start on this guy, on the hamburger top, even though it's now the bottom. We're going to rotate this dude out about 45 degrees. So I'm just going to type it in. And we know this dude up here is going to be rotating negative 45. If you're never sure, you can just click and drag and be like, oh yeah, negative value, son, 45 degrees. Cool. And now we can go ahead and scooch them in. So I'm just going to zoom in here. And this is where the art of animation really comes into play here, more so than the science. I want to get these guys pretty visually lined up. So I'm just going to do that. And I'm going to move this guy up here. I'm just using the Shift and arrow keys on my keyboard, and then I'm just jumping over to the arrow keys. Shift moves your layer 10 pixels over, and the arrow keys move them 1 pixel over. How about that? Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I may finesse this, but let's call that good for now. And now I want to animate the scale property. We're all set up to go here. So I'm just going to click and drag this guy, boom, until it gets to the edge. If these handles are bothering you, you can hit Command Shift H to hide them temporarily while you keep dragging away. And you'll notice, here's a great pro tip. If while you're clicking and dragging, you hold down the Command key, it slows down the rate of change, the rate of acceleration. If you click and drag and hold down Shift, it just jacks it up super fast. Woo! So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep holding down Command while I'm dragging, so I finesse that, which is good. And I'm going to do the other one here, up here. All right, all right, all right. Now you'll notice that this middle layer here, I actually goofed. See, the anchor point is in the wrong place. And now if I were to make this change here, you'll see that it's actually going to affect the entire path. So this is why you want to edit your anchor point ahead of time. This is actually a great example. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to here, and I'm going to delete these position keyframes. So I'm just going to click the stopwatch, and they're gone. And now what I can do, so I've just deleted those keyframes entirely. I'm going to hit Y on my keyboard in my ending position here, and I'm just going to make sure that this is just at the very end, so that when I'm doing the scale thing, see, it's just a little bit, but like, let's be precise here, right? It's just a little bit. Okay, and now I can drop my position keyframe again, and I'm going to hit J and drop another position keyframe here. So now when I go ahead and scale it, it'll scale it from the right place and it won't bone me. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure this is unchecked so these aren't linked. I'm just going to scale that in a little bit. And I can see at the end here, this is like kind of poking out. I'm just going to scoot them back like that someplace, and then maybe just mess with this a little bit again. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to hide my my dude here, my arrow ref. You're gone. Just have a look here. That looks pretty sharp. Can't really complain there. Now I'm just going to go ahead and close my work area so I can go ahead and preview my work so far. Now what I want to do is then close it out here, except I think I just turned this off. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. Great. Hide my arrows, and I'm going to drag this out here and hit N for N. It's going to close down my work area, and I can go ahead and just hit Control-0 to preview on my laptop. If you're working on just a full keyboard, you can just hit 0, just hit that big 0 key by your number pad, and it'll also preview. Okay, that looks sweet. Now we haven't eased the curves yet, right? We've just blocked out the motion. This is just linear animation at this point, but we've blocked it out, and that's rad, because what we're going to do in this lesson, because there's so many keyframes, I'm going to demo this tool that I use called Ease and Wizz, which is a badass tool, and I will be doing a separate blog post on just this tool because it is so great for UI animators, especially UI like animators, because it gives you like developer-friendly prototypes. It's super rad. It makes all the easing just like one click, and I love it. I don't like to teach third-party tools a whole lot because you can do most of this stuff inside After Effects, but it will be tedious as hell to watch me finesse all these curves at once. So I will save you that, I promise. So let's go ahead and do our squares because this is looking tight. Now, I know that I want my fade in to be about, or fade out, let's just time this out. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. About 12 frames long. So at, our frame rate here at 30, you can kind of just double it. So it's about 24 frames long. Let's call it 20. I'm feeling like 20 today. I don't know about you. So if you select all your layers and you hit Option T, you could put an opacity keyframe across everything. And that would be fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not going to make you wrong for that. But what I will do is I'm going to show you something a little bit cooler than that. And we can use an expression here to just save ourselves a little bit of time. So remember how I said these two guys fade at the exact same time? Well, check this out. I can actually link the opacity value of square 2b to the opacity value of square 2a by using an expression. If I option click this opacity stopwatch here, it brings up my little expression thing here. I can't code at all, but all you have to do is grab this little pick whip and drag it to the opacity variable here. Boom. Now what that does is it says, okay, these guys are linked now if I change the opacity. So it's like parenting basically, except parenting, when you parent layers, it doesn't lock in the opacity. It just locks in the scale position rotation. So now if I fade this layer, they'll fade together. That's pretty sweet, I think. And I can do the same thing now with the square 3. So if I option click opacity, grab the pick whip, drag it over to opacity here, good to go, click out, and now the same thing applies here. These will also fade, and I can see that these are now, there's an expression, these are red, and there's a little bit of code down here, which don't ask me to explain that, please. So now I can go ahead and I can just select the layers that I want to animate, and I'm just going to select these 4 now rather than the 6 initially. And now I can hit Option T, and I'm going to jump over 20 frames, boom, 20, hit Option T again. Or instead, I can just hit Command-Shift-0, Command-Shift-O, which brings up the O for opacity, which brings up the opacity dialog. I can just hit 0 right there. It'll automatically add a keyframe and drop it down, which is great. And that gives me this. Now, all we have to do is offset these guys, and we'll be good to go. And I believe they're offset about 4 frames. So what we want to do is we're just going to offset these 2 guys. So I'm going to go over, well, these 3 layers. I'm just going to zoom in on my timeline a little bit here. If you hit plus and minus on your keyboard, it zooms you in and out. And I can go ahead and jump over 4 frames and just slide this guy over 4 frames. And I can jump over 4 frames again, slide this guy over 4 frames. There's a million ways to do this. Some would argue that this is like kind of the getaway, but because there's so few, we'll just call it good. So now we can see that these are actually, it's creating that nice even cascade animation. That's exactly what we want here, which is great. Well, that's cool. Now, I don't know why I zoomed out. That was totally pointless. So now what I want to call attention to is that if you do that, you actually change the layer starting point. So I'm actually going to undo that because I just wanted to like show you that, but I think there's a better way fundamentally. So again, I can zoom in here. If I hit J, it brings me to my previous keyframe, and I jump over 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I can actually just slide these keyframes around, and I can do it from the keyboard. If I hit Option and then my right like arrow, I can just slide it over 4. And if you're thinking ahead, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then just reselect these guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that will actually slide the whole thing over nice and tidy. So that's just kind of 2 ways to think about sliding your keyframes around. The whole concept is you're just offsetting these in time. So as time is going, these are starting at different rates. So now I'm going to go ahead and just play this again. You can see it's really small. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger for you so it's a little bit slightly more dramatic. Okay. Okay, and so these are just linear animations here. We haven't finessed the velocity curves at all. Lastly, we're going to go ahead and just add this little tap here, which I know some of you may be like, dude, I don't need to know that. But like here, it's just kind of cute. It's just kind of cute to have a little tap here, right? So you can go ahead wherever you want and hit Option T to put an opacity keyframe. We'll jump out like, I don't know, 6 frames out and do another, I don't know, another 6 frames out. And we know it's going to fade out. Okay. You know, if you want, you can also, you know, click there. Sometimes it's nice to just like double click. It brings it up. I'm going to hit 0 for that. So it starts out and then it fades up and out. And then we'll have it just scale up a little bit, which is nice. Out here, scale. Very nice. Now you'll notice that our handles are missing. I'm going to put those handles back in there. Good. And the anchor point is in the middle, which is exactly where I want it, which makes me happy. So now I can just kind of like scrub through that. Okay, that's very cute. Very cute. And if I go here, if I want, sometimes it's helpful to actually trim this layer down. So I'll just go out a few keyframes and trim this layer. And the way you do that is Option right bracket and left bracket will trim your layer down to wherever your endpoint is. It just visually helps sometimes. So now I have this made, and I'm pretty much complete at this point with all the blocking and timing. And I'm going to close this out at, just tighten that up a little bit for my render. Sweet. That's looking great. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add my Ease and Wizz curve here. So if you're not using this tool, that's fine. I'm just going to say you can go to, if you just Google Ease and Wizz, apparently there's a song about this, like some song from the 80s or something like that. And it's a tool here. You don't have to worry about this right now. I'll do a whole blog post on why this thing is insanely badass for UI developers and designers. It's just like the really, really cool thing. But for now, it just comes, just note that it comes as a panel in After Effects. And you could go in and just ease your velocity curves here manually like I've shown you in the past or in the Fast Start video. But I'm just going to go ahead and select, Quart, Easing Out, great, Curvaceous, and I'm just going to select all these guys. I don't have to worry about my little tap duder. Select all my keyframes and hit Apply. And now when I go ahead, and you'll see it's added an expression, a mathematical easing expression that creates the velocity curve for me. And now when I go ahead and preview it, you'll see that it's actually just eased things out considerably. So as before, this was a linear motion. Now it's much, much, much smoother. And this is happening fast and it's crisp, but that will actually make a huge difference on your projects. So I know this was kind of a bear of a tutorial. There's a lot of stuff that we covered, and I just did that silly thing right there, which was completely unhelpful. I'm just going to double click here, and I can see that I've accidentally dragged this into the bottom, which is pretty annoying for everybody watching this, I'm sure. And I'm going to stop clicking things at this point and just say thank you for watching. This was a very fun tutorial. I hope you got some value from this. Drop me a comment below. I'd love to know if you think I'm insane or if this was helpful for you at all. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.